do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
the
office of President of the United States.
The start of Ronald Reagan's second term in 1985 set the tone for the 1980s.
New Coke is about to roll out internationally.
While the massive failure of New Coke made consumers wonder if things had gone too far. David Blum anointed Hollywood's young stars the Brat Pack, and they reigned supreme with hits like St. Elmo's Fire and The Breakfast Club.
In the industry, it's nice to have your friends to support you, even if they are your competitors at times. And so I think it's a nice trend.
Canada had an unusual hit with the Peanut Butter Solution, while the country's biggest star, Michael J. Fox, was taking over Hollywood with Back to the Future.
When you come out with a film like Back to the Future, all of a sudden it just quadruples the amount of attention you get. And I don't really understand it, but I can't honestly say that I don't like it.
1985 was a great example of a lot of directors being kind of let off the chain, allowed to do whatever they want. Sometimes that resulted in big blockbusters, and sometimes that resulted in changing the face of independent cinema.
When we look back on 1980s filmmaking, I think we're really thinking about 1985 because of films like Back to the Future, The Breakfast Club, Rocky IV, these incredible hits that resonated with all audiences and really launched what we think of as the 1980s film.
By 1985, we are in the 80s. You know, it's Reagan's second term, it's the beginning of the internet. There's a lot of, yappification of everything. There's these big, We Are the World and Live Aid concerts where musicians are commodifying themselves. So the films of this time, I think you feel a real tension between that, I want to make money, I want to be part of this new sort of corporate Hollywood versus, I'm alarmed by this new corporatization of everything. And I want to make some art that sort of chafes against that a little bit.
While blockbuster Hollywood films really dominated 1985, there was also two pretty unexpected and scrappy debuts from filmmakers who would go on to define a lot of the 1990s.
It's very rare that filmmakers arrive fully formed, right? There's usually some kind of a curve. And with Joel and Ethan Coen, there is no curve. There's sort of just this straight line, straight up, out of nowhere and into the top tier of American movie makers. And that's Blood Simple.
This movie cost almost nothing to make. They financed it by shooting a trailer for a movie that did not exist at all.
Marty.
Basically, just the scene of the man going to finish off someone on the side of the road, and then the final scene of the bullets going into the darkened bathroom. And on the strength of that, they got this film financed, and it launched not just their career, obviously, but Frances McDormand's career as well.
You're used to seeing Hollywood movies where, you stab someone and they die, you shoot someone and they die. It goes the way you want. Rarely do you see it where it's like messy and chaotic, and the way it would be in real life. If I tried to shoot someone or stab someone, I am sure that I would fail at it miserably, and I would end up, with the guy who suddenly comes alive in the trunk of my car, and you have to decide, am I gonna keep killing this guy? It was that kind of movie. It just got under your skin.
The film is part of this 80s neo-noir resurgence. It's thinking pretty on the nose about movies like Double Indemnity, like Detour, like Strangers on a Train, but it's this much more rural element that comes into the 80s noir, the idea that it's not just the cities that are corrupt, it is the whole of the nation that is corrupt, that is this sort of shadowland.
All right, get ready to enter the weird and wacky world of Pee Wee Herman.
Mr. T! Hi!
How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Cool suit you got there.
Thanks, Pee Wee. How are you?
I'm just fine. I'm so excited you came.
Well, thank you. We're really looking forward to it.
Pee Wee himself is such a unique character. It's one of those things where you look back and realize how magical that film is.
There is a very strong argument to make that Pee-wee's Big Adventure is the best debut of any director. Tim Burton comes in, directing this like he might never get the chance to direct again. And I can only imagine that was his thinking going in, where he was like, I'm gonna put everything I have, everything that I love, everything that's important to me into this one film. Bicycles, monsters, small town America.
You can see the template for what Tim Burton's career is going to be in the future. There's a hospital sequence that easily could have been ripped straight out of Beetlejuice. They incorporate claymation at one point. There's a lot of creativity going on in this film.
The great thing about the Pee-wee character is he makes anything he does funny. If you even just think of him trying to eat.
Good morning, Pee-wee. Good morning, Mr. Breakfast.
It's like he has never eaten before. He treats everything as foreign and bizarre, and just walking down the street is funny when Pee-wee does it.
He didn't care that people thought he was weird. He just did his thing, and if they didn't like it, he'd be like, meh. He'd just go on into the next thing. And he met people on the fringe, and he somehow got them to just jump on board with him and become friends. And I think that's a really important message, is to just be yourself and, you know, be resourceful in a situation too, because he was always finding a way out from a bucking bronco to, you know, jumping on a train. I just think it's an incredible character, and I think that he really does stand out in 80s pop culture.
In 1985, Hollywood was still searching for the next Star Wars, but movies like E.T. and Gremlins had made them consider that maybe the next big sci-fi was going to come out as a teen movie.
I would kill to be in the room where Back to the Future was pitched to Universal, because nothing about this plot makes any sense, and yet we are there for it. You have science fiction, you have action, you have drama, you have a lot of comedy. It hits every mark, and I think it's really brilliant that Robert Zemeckis was able to balance all of that.
If I were in high school, would I be a friend with my father? Would we be pals? And that was sort of the germ of the idea, and that's where we wanted to take the movie and see what we could do.
It's about a very modern high school kid played by Michael J. Fox, who through a series of circumstances ends up going back to the 1950s, joining that teenage subculture, you know, infiltrating a gang of friends who include his future mom and dad, trying to finagle his mom and dad to get together in order to secure his own existence, in the comic logic of cause and effect, right? The grandfather paradox.
Now remember, according to my theory, you interfered with your parents' first meeting. If they don't meet, they won't fall in love, they won't get married, and they won't have kids. That's why your older brother's disappearing from that photograph.
Back to the Future introduces us to an era of film and TV that was dominated by Michael J. Fox. He became kind of the it boy, the charismatic but relatable all-American man.
One of the great things about Michael J. Fox's performance in Back to the Future is I think a lot of people don't realize he was playing Alex P. Keaton during the day and Marty McFly at night. He was literally working constantly between Family Ties and Back to the Future.
When you have a job that you love, you know, you show up for work and you're excited about doing it and getting on with the business of doing it. And with me, that just happened twice a day. You know, it happened in the morning and then it happened at night.
There's no other movie, in my opinion, that creates the tension so beautifully like it did with the clock tower scene. It's as close to a perfect scene that you can possibly get because it builds the tension, but it's still a little bit silly. Like, you're kind of like, well, they have to plug it in and the clock's going off, all these things. But yet, because it all works together in this cohesive way in the world that is being built, it just makes sense.
What's really interesting about Back to the Future that it taps into from the decade that it's part of is the science can save us mentality, the excitement around the creativity and potential in science. We haven't become bitter about it or jaded yet. Science still has magic in it.
It's interesting to have Real Genius and Back to the Future in the same year. These are both science fiction films, although I think Back to the Future kind of is quasi-science fiction, whereas Real Genius is just science.
It really feels like the anti-Weird Science, the anti-Revenge of the Nerds. It's a movie about nerds, but they're not awful people. Yes, they have sex. Yes, they get into trouble, but it's pretty innocent trouble.
Real Genius is Val Kilmer's breakout role, and he is incredible in this film. He's not really known to be a comedian, and yet he is so funny. In fact, he delivers some of these lines standing on his head.
Would you be prepared if gravity reversed itself?
The
only thing I can't figure out is how to keep the change in my pockets.
There's something about Kilmer that makes you believe that he can pull it off. He's like the poster boy for unrealized potential. Watching him play this role of someone who has been coasting his whole life. He is brilliant. He solves mathematical problems in his sleep and then goes off and creates elaborate pranks to play on people who annoy him.
One of the things I love about this movie is the climax. They basically use this laser to fill a house with popcorn.
The amount of popcorn was 140 tons of popcorn. There are no miniatures. Everything is absolutely real. Because first of all, it was the cheapest way to do it and the most authentic way to do it and the only way that we could do it and tie people in and have it look real. So that's what we did.
It's amazingly on point about where warfare and governments are going. And we are living in the world that Chris Knight is trying to stop, which I guess means the movie is a cautionary tale. But it's really, really funny. And I'm okay with a moral being delivered if something is that entertaining.
In 1985, New Yorker writer David Blum coined the term of Hollywood's Brat Pack, a group of teenage actors who suddenly were taking all cinema by storm. And two movies in 1985 really represent these central films of the Brat Pack.
It's hard to think of a teen movie that has had more representation and more impact than The Breakfast Club. The success of The Breakfast Club, I think, lies in its focus on teenagers, people who are trying to form identity. What could be really tropey archetypal figures makes sense when you put that on people who haven't quite crystallized what they are yet.
We have a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a criminal, and a princess. They're all kind of these archetypes, these stereotypes of high school life, and I love that he dug in and excavated them to find out what's really behind these stereotypes. And bringing them together in detention is so brilliant. I just think it's such an iconic movie.
It is now 7:06. You have exactly 8 hours and 54 minutes to think about why you're here, to ponder the error of your ways.
For me, the best moments are the little touches of physical comedy, especially when the kids are so bored just trying to pass the time. I think he gets such genuine, real teen boredom out of them. It's very funny.
I think that there was something really kind of surprising or precious about the bad boy, played by the actor Judd Nelson. And I think because you already know he's the bad boy and he's so angry that when you realize that he's actually quite sad and that he comes from this unstable home, and there's something really kind of heartbreaking about it.
Hughes just allows himself to remember and to think and to feel about those times.
John Hughes informed my ideas about romance and teenage angst, and I'm sure he did that for a lot of people. Even though the film was a little problematic in terms of, Ali Sheedy's character gets made over, and it's like, why can't she just stay the way she is? But I will say that it is really representative of trying to find your voice and trying to find yourself in high school.
St. Elmo's Fire. This is the movie that really started to give us the idea of the Brat Pack as we would then know them to be. This is the same year as The Breakfast Club, and this is what I find so fascinating. You're watching a lot of the same actors, like Emilio Estevez, both playing high school students as well as playing college graduates. So there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief required here for the ages.
I feel like, yes, I missed out in as far as going to college, but I think college, you know, aside from earning your degree, you form friendships that are, forever lasting. I think I've done the same thing as far as, the group of people that I've been able to work with. I've been able to bond, friendships, same way.
St. Elmo's Fire, to me, was this story of your 20s, and your 20s being really quite dangerous. Someone said that your 20s are basically like your terrible twos, except you're an adult and you can drink and do drugs and have sex. And that's your 20s. And I think that's a really accurate description of what your 20s are like.
Yeah.
They were kind of hurting each other and breaking each other's heart and trying to survive or make it big in the big city and move on to the next stage of their life.
I'm not sure there was ever a movie that came out that was as watched and as kind of loathed at the same time. So it was like the movie that everybody loved to hate, but you had to go see this movie. This was not a movie that you could miss.
Sometimes I hear when people don't like the film, it's like they don't care about these people that have a lot of privilege, but I always was like, I don't know, I kind of wanted to experience what they experienced, you know, even though they might have been more privileged than me. I wanted to maybe be like, oh, I'm privileged and this is the only problem I have. I can you know, and I kind of wanted to hang out with them and be in their clique.
Outside of the Brat Pack, there was another kind of young adult film that really seemed to capture the imagination in 1985, and this was movies about kids and young people in real danger. Kids being faced with death, turning into folk heroes, turning into these weird adventurers. It was kind of cool.
While The Goonies wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg, it was based on a story by Steven Spielberg, and you can tell that from the first frame of this movie to the last, that it has that Spielberg imprint of adolescence and this sort of restlessness, this yearn for adventure that I think so many people feel when they are that young. It's the idea that there could be a little bit of magic in something, and you could go and discover this pirate ship, and maybe that is the solution to being able to save your family home.
It's basically Adventures in Suburbia. They've discovered that there's this underground tunnels and there's treasure involved, and so they're all trying to, you know, get the treasure, and they try calling the cops, and they're like, there's monsters down here, there's giant bugs, and da-da-da, but nobody comes to rescue them, so they really kind of have to rescue each other and rescue themselves.
Be quiet, yeah.
What the hell is that?
I think one of the reasons why Richard Donner worked so well as the director of The Goonies is he was very interested in improvising with kids. I think he gave a lot of space to have kids talk how they talk, act how they act, and that kind of infectious energy of children really comes through on the screen.
See, there's nothing to be scared of. See, there's only two customers who went inside the restaurant.
Yeah, but what if they're not customers? What if they're drug dealers?
Drug dealers? Shit, man.
Seeing a character like Data was just a revelation to me. As this like little Asian kid who grew up in the suburbs, he was funny, he was clever, he was intelligent, and he was really quirky. And I love that because Asian kids, we didn't really see ourselves in movies when we were growing up, especially a movie like The Goonies.
There's a sense of warmth that goes on with Goonies that is enduring. There's a sense of community, friendship. You get the sense that whatever happens to these kids later in life, they will always remember that particular summer. They will always remember that great adventure they went on. And you would like to believe that those bonds of friendship still exist.
The Legend of Billie Jean. Now that's a movie. This is another one of these underrated teen comedies from the 80s, but this one has a particular extra weight. It starts off with Billie Jean Davy being sexually assaulted by this man that owns a store, and then her brother shoots this man and they go on the run. And for this movie to be talking about this kind of issue in a time when we saw literal women being sexually assaulted in other teen movies for laughs, it feels extremely bold, it feels extremely important, and I think it almost laid the groundwork for movies in the 90s like Thelma and Louise.
We have this stunningly beautiful, statuesque Helen Slater playing Billie Jean. In the beginning of the film, she has long blonde hair, she's very tanned, the camera's focusing a lot on her legs. By the end of the film, there's a real transformation. She has shaved her head, she's wearing men's clothing and fighting for her rights. There's nothing that remarkable about the character of Billie Jean. She's wronged and she wants to fight for herself.
Fair is fair. We didn't start this, we didn't mean it to happen, but we're not giving up till you pay. Fair is fair!
The support that Billie Jean gets predates social media and going viral, but she goes viral because all the kids come together, they support her, they actually create a network.
One thing that I love is when they go on the run and they have to steal stuff from stores if they want to eat, but they leave little IOU cards with the intention that they're going to go and pay that back. They hold their ideas and their ideals so strongly that they want to adhere to that.
Sylvester Stallone came to prominence in the 70s, but the 80s were really his decade. He was dominating the box office in the 1980s and in 1985 especially with Rocky IV and Rambo First Blood Part 2.
I don't watch any sports. I don't even particularly like boxing, but I love the Rocky movies. Now, Rocky I, classic, you know, almost neo-realist in its style. Rocky II, a kind of retread of that, but this time, Rocky wins. Rocky III, we're getting into more comic book territory. Rocky IV is pure cartoon, and I love that. Sylvester Stallone, directing, writing, starring, puts a robot in it because I guess that's what kids love, and at the time of its release, Rocky IV was looked down upon. It was seen as a joke. It was a giant box office hit, but critics couldn't understand why Sylvester Stallone went in this direction.
This is a propaganda film. It would be ludicrous to pretend it isn't. The sort of cartoonish villainy of Dolph Lundgren and these various Soviet generals in the film as they murder Apollo Creed and then drag Rocky across Europe to bring him to this fight.
Where?
It's in Russian.
Are you nuts?
Rocky, what's going on? And the way the movie then concludes with like the fall of the Berlin Wall in some weird way as Rocky unites this Soviet audience against their evil Soviet overlords, right?
Obviously, one of the great things of any Rocky movie is the training montage, and I think Rocky IV undeniably has the best training montage in the series. It is this wacky mix of Stallone training in the woods in Siberia, using logs, using rivers, and Ivan Drago training in a super high-tech facility where he's like essentially a robot, and this mix of like who will win, man versus machine. It's a lot of fun.
The thing is about Stallone is that he understands kind of what people want, you know, what they want, that energy, you know, of believing in a character. And Rocky, people think of him as simple-minded, but he's so wise. He's such a wise character and a good person, you know, and even if he doesn't win, you're okay with that. He's still your hero. And I love that about the movie.
There's a line in Rambo First Blood Part 2 that belongs on any list of sort of key 1980s movie dialogue.
Sir, do we get to win this time?
That's an amazing line. It implies so much in two different directions. First of all, the idea that America lost Vietnam as if it's their loss, as if it's not about all kinds of other losses of life and just destruction of property and the complete razing of a country, but also that there's still something to win there, and that in the 80s, winning the Vietnam War should be on anybody's mind.
This film was extremely politically controversial, and Reagan actually referenced it when he was talking about sending American troops into Cambodia, saying this time we're going to win just like in Rambo. What Stallone thought he was making was a politically neutral film.
Anybody of a kind of a progressive sensibility couldn't help but be offended by this film, but it also needs to be addressed as an extremely important film of its day. At the very least, what you could do is go back to the film that inspired it, which is an extremely different film, a masterpiece of subtlety compared to Rambo Part 2, but at least it kind of gives you an idea of where this figure originally came from, but most importantly, how he became essentially a symbol of his era.
There was a real spectrum of filmmaking in 1985. On the one hand, you had these bombastic, absolutely over-the-top, big-budget films. And then on the other, you had these quieter, more subtle, almost 1970s sensibility films that launched a lot of new voices.
It's weird to me how many people seem to think that the peanut butter solution is a fever dream that may or may not have existed, because it was played pretty ubiquitously on television, on different networks aimed at kids.
Every kid that sat there and watched it was just mystified. What was this movie? Who made it? Why did it exist?
You dare to imagine in my class? I've told you 1,000 times, no imagination. Only what you see.
Twisted kids films are a fun genre to enjoy when you're an adult. When you're a kid and you don't have the vocabulary to explain the insanity you've just witnessed, it's very scary.
The Peanut Butter Solution is a story of a kid that goes in a house that's haunted by ghosts that scare him so badly that he loses his hair. So then those ghosts tell him that there's a special peanut butter solution that if he puts on his hair, it will grow again, but he screws it up. So his hair grows really long, and then all the kids start growing long hair, and then there's a guy that kidnaps that hair, makes it into paintbrushes, that creates paintings that you can then jump into. Yeah, it's wild, and my little brain in the 90s could not comprehend it.
You can't go to school, Mike. They phoned. They don't want you there. Come back.
No! Your hair's trailing on the ground!
The film was produced by Roch de Mer, who was a Quebecois film producer, and he wanted to make movies that would teach kids about complicated feelings and present them with movies that would challenge them in order for them to be able to handle more difficult emotional concepts as adults.
I think that is something that a lot of children's films have a hard time exploring, but it's so important because children experience death just like we do, always for the first time, and it's always incredibly scary. So to broach the subject with a little bit of levity, a little bit of imagination is actually a really positive thing and quite forward-thinking for 1985.
I think a lot of films in the 1980s focused on the monotony of everyday life, the monotony of office culture, of bureaucracy, of paperwork, of paying your mortgage or your rent, but no one did it to more comic and imaginative perfection than Terry Gilliam with Brazil.
The movie is just rich with visuals. It's got all this retro-futurist technology like pneumatic pipes and magnifying typewriter screens, and it's an incredible world that Terry Gilliam builds that you're just completely sucked into.
What Brazil does so well is marry the contrast of Ayn Randian Art Deco style severity of bureaucracy with the mess and deterioration and poverty of those who have to keep that system afloat to make it look like it's working.
Are you telling me that this is illegal? Well, yes and no. Officially, only Central Service operatives are supposed to touch the stuff. Would you hold this, please?
You see these massive structures that are like Blade Runner-esque in their gorgeousness, but what you also are staying with the main character is the struggle to keep that moving, so that people like his mother, my favorite character, are able to pursue plastic surgery constantly to just look younger and be in these opulent spaces that are gilded and soft and luxurious and ignore the mess.
Brazil is a cinephile's perfect first film. I was a kid growing up that would read 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, and go, oh man, yeah, these authors, they really get me. And Brazil, it was all up there on screen. Brazil is also a great one because you cannot talk about it without discussing the way that Terry Gilliam struggled with the studio. And as a young cinephile, you love those stories. The individual going up against the mammoths that are the producers, that want to reshape his vision, that want to change things.
Universal hated this film and really didn't want to release it. They tried to recut it and release it much to Terry Gilliam's horror. And so what Terry Gilliam did was launch a bunch of illegal screenings at universities. And in fact, the Los Angeles Film Critics awarded it their top film, despite the fact it had yet to be released.
It is Terry Gilliam's soul on that screen. It's his Wild Swing. It's his first novel. He directed other movies, but this was the first time he could do whatever he wanted after Time Bandits and Jabberwocky. And even on a small budget, he made something that was uniquely his own.
Film critic Leighton Grist has called After Hours the pinnacle of what they term the yuppie nightmare cycle. These films about yuppies who essentially meet a beautiful woman and their whole lives are thrown into disarray. Movies like Into the Night, Blue Velvet, Something Wild, these are all examples of a kind of brief boom in these one wild night movies.
Oh my God, I lived in New York in 1985, and I felt like After Hours was the movie of my life. There was this very narrow ribbon down the center of the island of Manhattan where the yuppies with their beepers and the investment bankers all were, and anything else that was on the fringes, you were sort of risking your life to go there. You just felt like anyone, anywhere, at any time could come up to you and anything could happen.
It's my favorite Scorsese film. I think that it's great that he did something that is not what we expect from him, and I think he didn't care, and I think that's why it's so good, you know?
There's this great shot where Linda Fiorentino throws down the keys, and it's like one of those great Scorsese camera moments where it's like the keys fall in slow motion. And it's like, this is Paul about to go down the rabbit hole. Like, this is the point of no return if he takes these keys and goes forward with his night.
Well, of course he's here. You invited him.
One thing about After Hours is it's anchored by this, amazing lead performance by Griffin Dunne, but the supporting cast is really extraordinary.
You get Rosanna Arquette, who you can't really get a handle on who she is. Martin Scorsese used Terry Garr and Catherine O'Hara kind of against type. And by the time you've got Catherine O'Hara leading everybody through the darkness with the Mr. Softy truck and this vigilante mob, you really realize that you can't trust any of them, and everything that you thought you had a handle on, you don't have a handle on.
Let me out of this thing. Now. Do you hear me? Let me out.
You look at some of the critical commentary from, let's say, the mid-'80s, a lot of critics feel like movies are dying, that they've been kind of body snatched by corporate garbage. What's funny now is if you look at the movies from 1985, maybe this is the scourge of relativism, these movies feel really tactile and analog and old school and desirable. We're living in a moment now where everything is interlocking product and you're expected to see 20 movies in order to understand the 21st movie. It's really nice to think back to 1985 where the worst thing you could say was they made a fourth Rocky movie, The Rocky cinematic universe is a place I would rather be than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that's just me.